Todd Brommelkamp joins us today. We look at the riveting matchup, Iowa-Michigan State. What's left to play for the Hawkeyes? And are there some signs going forward this offense can take a step forward?
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Trent Condon. He's Todd Brommelkamp, and this is the Locked On Podcast Network. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now number one for sports podcasts and sports podcast networks. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Todd and I, we've been covering the Hawkeyes for over 50 years combined. We're getting old, and we watch each and every one of these. And Todd, as we make our way through the back half of the season, we're going to talk about, obviously, what's to play for here for the Iowa matchup against Michigan State. Some positivity, perhaps some negativity, some frustrations in last week's loss against USC and what's stacked up here these last couple of weeks in November. We got some basketball coming up, and we'll make our picks presented by FanDuel. But it's a simple question. It's one that I know you've done radio shows in the past. I've done radio shows. Hope is lost for anything big. There will be no college football playoff. There will be no hope of a Big Ten championship. The Big Ten West is dead. So what is left after yet another frustrating loss over the weekend and another woulda, shoulda, coulda against USC?
I think it's a great question because in the playoff era, I think it changes how you look at the remainder of the season here. And as you said, in the past, you always had sort of that, the booby prize of, hey, we could still win the Big Ten West and go to Indianapolis and eat at St. Elmo's and lose to Michigan or Ohio State the next day. That's gone. So what do you have left to play for? Well, if you're Kirk Ferentz and the Hawkeyes, and I know it's cliche, but pride, they've got 2 games left. If they win both of them, it could send them to a slightly better bowl game. And I think we'll probably talk about possible bowl destinations coming up a little bit later. But that's the long and short of it, is at this point, you're playing for pride. You're playing for those guys that have had an Iowa uniform on for 4 or 5 years. Although that's rare in this day and age, you're trying to send Mark Gronowski out on as high of a note as possible in his one and only year as a Hawkeye. But yeah, there really isn't anything substantive to play for at this point.
Now, for a degenerate like myself, playing for Las Vegas sounds pretty good in a bowl destination. Maybe a return to Orlando. Tampa. There's a lot of things that are still out there for Iowa, but the bowl games also, it's just so different. I mean, how many times you'd open up those bowl projections and trying to figure things out? Because the selection process becomes so much different. You have contracts where you can only use a certain amount of teams in a certain amount of years with these bowl contracts. It's a completely different environment. But Todd, I think you hit the most salient point. The college football playoff, the 12-team structure now of it has changed, not just for the upper tier, but for us here with Iowa fans in that next tier of programs. Your expectations, what's left to play for a lot of years, 8-4, and certainly with the schedule that Iowa had coming into the season. Hey, if you could get to 8-4, that's a pretty successful year. But because of what was still on the table when we flipped the calendar in November, it just rings really hollow right now.
Yeah. And, for someone like me who at the beginning of the season thought this looked like an 8-4 football team, they've played pretty much up to my expectations. The problem is there are a lot of people out there that thought maybe 10-2 was a possibility this year, or looked at some of the better games that Iowa had performed in and overlooked some of the warts that this team may have and still has to this point. You talk about the bowl game scenario. How many teams does the Big Ten get into the college football playoff? Because there will be a trickle-down effect there if they were to somehow manage to sneak a 4th team in there. Everybody sort of gets pulled up by their bootstraps. But if you get 3 teams in, then the trickle-down effect begins. And as you mentioned, you've got the contracts and you can only go to a bowl so many times. And it's so convoluted now that I'm not sure the average person or even you and me can really necessarily understand it without taking the time to sit down and study it.
Final thoughts from USC. I know it was almost a week ago now as we're coming to you a little bit later on in the week, but I've said my piece. People have heard certainly my thoughts on that one. So give it a rip. Anything left from the USC game? Any lingering frustrations or positivity? Anything that you can take away that's still out there? Little meat left on the bone.
Yeah, I was watching the game at work on Saturday, and I was sending a text to the buddy text chain, and I was like 21-7 or whatever this is. I was like, this is not going to last. We've all seen this before. We know how this is going to end. I think it's how it ended that really frustrated the hell out of a lot of people. I'm not a big fan of complaining about the officiating. I do think that fans probably have one leg to stand on with some of the officiating. I don't buy into conspiracy theories that some heavy hand from above is trying to elevate USC and get them into the playoffs or whatever. And was he in? Was he out? I was listening to Dolph and Pat on the radio on that call, and I was just as confused after getting home and watching it on TV as I was listening on the radio. I mean, that's just one of those things. Remember the thing with the dress? What color was the dress? And you show it to people, and it's one color to half of them. And I think that's the in and out with that play there at the end of the game. But ultimately, and again, fans don't like to hear it, but you can't put yourself in that type of position. The first half was all Iowa, and in the second half, Iowa just disappeared.
I said I did like a halftime little report thing, jumped on for 5 minutes. And at the time, I said at 21-10, it felt like they should have been up a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, again, a late first half situation. You get 10 yards on that first run. You're moving a little bit, and then you don't even try. And I wonder if the Penn State game spooked Kirk a little bit. We'll just go into the locker room. We're up 11, and we'll be fine. Eventually, of course, we found out they weren't going to be fine. But, Todd, we've had that conversation how many times? I mean, late clock situations. Maybe one of the biggest highlights for Hawkeye fans is the Capital One game from 2005 after the 2004 season. That was clock mismanagement. Now, it turned out great, obviously, but it was awful clock management, how it had to play out in the fashion that it did, and it hasn't changed 20 years later.
No, they stumbled into a win on that day after, again, dominating LSU in the first half of that game, and then LSU comes back in the second half, and Iowa needs a miraculous play on the final throw from Drew Tate to Warren Holloway. The clock management, and it's not just Kirk. You watch a lot of college football, and you see a lot of other coaches that are criticized for it. You see it in the NFL as well sometimes with Matt LaFleur and the Packers. You would think by now at this point in this modern era of college football, you take as many points as you can possibly get. There's no point in taking your foot off the gas, and maybe that's one of the other reasons that ultimately came back to cost Iowa in that game. But at the end of the day, it's water under the bridge. You got a couple games left over, and if you spend too much time dwelling on the USC loss, if you're Iowa, who knows what happens this weekend against a heavy underdog in Michigan State.
Yeah, Iowa's 16.5-point favorite in this one against Michigan State, a Michigan State team that's lost 7 in a row. A lot of speculation about Jonathan Smith's future there and what that's going to look like. And, after what we saw a year ago from Michigan State, Iowa played about as poorly, certainly defensively, as I can remember. Just the missed tackles in that game up in East Lansing last year was befuddling. It's one thing when they got beat. We know the cornerbacks really struggled last season, but it was a missed tackles, just so unfilled Parker-like a year ago. Aiden Childs is coming back. They got Nick Marsh coming back, a wide receiver. I thought Michigan State was going to take another step forward this year, and they've been absolutely dreadful. They've been bad on both lines. You can run it. You can throw it. It feels like this should be an easy victory, but it's normally Iowa football. You're like, well, it's Iowa. It'll be tight one way or the other. I don't know. I have a feeling the Spartan team, there might be some quit we see at Kinnick Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, I think this is one of those recipes for disaster for Michigan State. You're going into Kinnick Stadium, senior day, the opportunity for Iowa, the propensity to take the ball early. They get the ball first and march down the field and score. You could see this game getting out of hand for them pretty quickly.
We will talk a little bit more about the matchup, and I got something for Todd here. I want to get his perspective. It is senior day. We will hear 28 guys. Now we find out as Cohen Entringer is also going to walk. We're going to hear their names called as they walk out of Kinnick for the final time. However, who's going to get the loudest ovation? We'll talk about that, break down the matchup. Plus, we got basketball to talk about, all to come as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live odds and everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And it's not just the NBA. They got you covered for all your football action. It begins on Thursday night with Thursday Night Football. And, of course, Iowa, Michigan State. 16.5 is the number. They got props in there that you can get involved with. You can take a jump on that one and a whole lot more, all on the FanDuel app. Plus, college basketball is there. The Hawkeyes against Chicago State, currently a 32.5 point favorite against the Cougars. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Trent Condon, Todd Brommelkamp, back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Todd, it's senior day. Some past performances. I think one of my favorites was back in 2004. We talked about that earlier with the Capital One Bowl. Iowa clinching their last championship, regular season championship. On the field afterwards, got down early against Wisconsin, came roaring back in that one. There's been some great memories here. Purdue after 2015 and the snow. That was another good one. And walking through the snow and seeing the parents out there for that one. I don't think this one's going to have probably the same kind, but I want to talk to you about the players. And this is intriguing because we've seen some negativity. The boo birds that have come out, some players don't love that. It's the final go around. And we've seen that a couple of different times. But the ovation, who's going to get the loudest pop? You're a pro wrestling guy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have dwindled. I'll see if my son, he's 6. He had his first wrestling practice on a Wednesday night. So we're going to see if he starts to maybe jump into that. I've stepped away, but they always talk about the pop. Who's going to get the loudest pop for the Hawkeyes come Saturday afternoon?
That's a good question. I'll be interested to hear what the ovation is for Mark Gronowski.
Yeah.
Even though he was a one and done, he's the winningest quarterback in college football. And I still think a lot of the success over the next couple games rides on what reaction he gets. Somebody on the defense, somebody on the offensive line. You tell me who you think is going to get the loudest ovation.
I think Gronowski will get a good ovation. I think it'll be a good one. It'll be probably one of the loudest, certainly in the top 10% of them. I would definitely put in that. He's the quarterback. He's the name that even the most casual fans are certainly going to know. So I think he's going to have a good one. And he's been fun to watch. I think when we go back and after the season, we kind of rate his season. I think the passing is going to be considered a disappointment, but the running game has exceeded, I think, what anybody had. Playing through the injury that he sustained in the Indiana game, the way that he's bounced back, I think he's going to get a good one. You got a couple of veterans on the offensive line. You obviously have Logan Jones. Start of his career at center, it was a struggle. Bad snaps, some issues up there. He has turned into, obviously, a very dependable guy. I think Jennings Dunker is going to get one of the loudest. I mean, you're going to see the red hair flowing, right, with the flowing locks. That's going to get people going. He's kind of been a goofy character, too, so he's got some personality. I think you're going to see a big one for Jennings Dunker, but this is at the top of my list. I think this is going to be the guy that's going to get the loudest one, and it is Caden Weechin. Weechin, what he's done as a return guy, he's an Iowa kid, undersized, 5'9". He's also local Williamsburg kid. So there's a lot of different reasons for it, but that's going to be my betting choice. If I had to put money down on this one, I think Caden Weechin's going to get the biggest ovation from the crowd.
Yeah, I would probably put Weechin at the top of the board and then lump Gronowski and Dunker somewhere together and get that money fighting against one another. But maybe they can recreate some of those Solon Beef Days hay bale tosses and Dunker can toss Weechin or something.
Yes, that would be good. Yeah, chuck him across and chuck him to his parents. How about that? On the defensive side, Llewellyn will get a good one. Herkett will be a good one. I think maybe it might be – this is tough. So Aaron Graves should get a great one. I mean, that guy has been an absolute warrior in there. He's been a 3-year starter for this team, has played a lot of football. TJ Hall, he'll go through it. We'll see about his availability, and Kirk talked a little bit about that this week. Maybe the one that I'm most intrigued by, Cohen Entringer, because he's going through just a 1-year starter, but he was a guy that got to go to Vegas for Big Ten football media days. He's just such a leader. But I want to see Xavier Wampa, what it is, because speaking of disappointments, I think overall Xavier Wampa's career for a lot of Hawkeye fans would kind of probably be considered a disappointment. Iowa so rarely gets 5-star players. And though he's been a 3-year starter, he's done good things. You go back to his freshman campaign when he played in that bowl game against Kentucky, had the pick 6. They thought, here we go. and it hasn't lived up to the levels I think a lot of Hawkeye fans hope for. I do want to see with Xavier Wampa what his ovation is going to look like.
I'll tell you what, if you're a fan watching this right now, get up out of your feet and give him a standing ovation, because in this day and age, a 5-star recruit like him, he probably had some opportunities to leave, to go elsewhere. Seeing guys like that who ride the roller coaster, the ups and downs, stick with the original program and make it all the way through to senior day, they're going to become rarer and rarer at this point. We're talking about Mark Gronowski getting one of the loudest ovations, and he was a one-year guy. So I agree with you. Xavier Wampa probably didn't live up to the expectations a lot of fans had for him when he originally came in, given the recruiting background. But there's a kid who just continued to work hard, stuck it out, and saw his career through to the end. He deserves as much of an ovation as anybody else on Saturday, in my opinion.
Few other guys, Drew Stevens, I'm sure he's probably going to get a pretty good one. People know him, obviously hear his name a ton. How about Carson Shire? A guy that stuck around, waited to the end to hear his name called and to play in his final season. Him and Jaden Harrell, both those guys would have had opportunities in a ton of different places. They could have gone down to a MAC level program or Conference USA and probably been a multi-year starter down there. They stuck it out, waited to their final campaign, and became starters at the end. So I'll be interested to see both those guys. But it's a good day, a good time to reflect and to certainly celebrate. Let's do that. Celebrate all these guys and the way and the dedication that they've had for Iowa football. To the actual game, Michigan State stinks kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
Just defensively, their offensive line has been brutal this year. I do have nightmares of Aiden Childs from last year and Nick Marsh and what they can do. But as we talked about earlier, maybe there's going to be some quit in this football game. I want to see Gronowski chuck it a few times. Let him air it out a little bit. Let's open it up. And certainly if I was in control of the game, let him open it up. And can we finally get Kamari Moulton over 100 yards in this football game? I mean, he has been between, it feels like 75 and 90 yards in seemingly every game this year that he's been healthy for. Let's get Moulton into triple digits.
Yeah, we talked about senior days of the past, and I think the best senior days turn out to be the ones where the games get out of hand, and maybe you get in a position where you can give some guys some curtain calls. 2002 is probably my favorite senior day with Northwestern and the offensive linemen coming off holding hands. I would love to see them have this game capably in hand going into the fourth quarter, and you send the backup quarterback in there. Mark Gronowski can run off, and maybe Jennings Dunker comes off one final time, or defensively. Those are my favorite types of senior days, the one where you can sort of work a curtain call into it during the game as opposed to just celebrating before. But you said it best. This is not going to be or should not be a very competitive football game. And Michigan State is riding that losing streak. The speculation about Jonathan Smith's future, I think there could be a lot of quit in that Spartan team this weekend. Now, you and I both know sometimes teams rise to the occasion and win one for the Gipper. I don't think this is going to be that case. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Iowa has had this propensity for taking the ball early this season, get the ball first, march downfield, try to get a score. Maybe you get a defensive turnover on the second possession, a pick six or something like that, and all of a sudden this snowball rolls down here. I don't expect this to be a very interesting or competitive game. And if it is, then we're going to have some interesting things to talk about next week with the Nebraska game.
No doubt, quick turnaround. It'll be the Friday matchup, Black Friday against the Huskers next week. Todd, I want to jump over to basketball here quickly with you. We'll get our first real look at Iowa. We thought maybe Xavier would give them some kind of resistance. That wasn't the case last Friday. That's not a very good Xavier team, as little Ricky Pitino might be in some trouble there in year number one, at least. We'll see it next week against Ole Miss. They got Chicago State coming up on Thursday evening. They'll cruise in that one. FanDuel has them favored by 32.5. I am intrigued, though, to see this Iowa women's team. And when I opened up my app this morning and I saw Iowa as a favorite in the game against the 7th-ranked Baylor Bears, that was an eye-opener for me. Maybe changed what my expectations for be against this matchup. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know a ton about the Baylor women's team at this point in time. However, that was eye-opening to see Iowa favored in this game on a neutral floor.
Yeah, is Kim Mulkey still their coach? Do they still have Brittany Griner? I can't give you an in-depth rundown of Baylor, but I can tell you they're a damn good basketball program. And if you would have told me blindly earlier in the week that Iowa was going to be favored in that, I think I would have been just as surprised as you. But this is going to be that early season test, and we'll learn a lot more about where this team is coming out of it. Do I expect them to win? I can't honestly sit here and tell you that I do, but the fact that someone out there in Vegas looks at them and makes them the odds-on favorite in this game kind of tells you everything you need to know about the respect that the Hawkeye program has at this point.
Yeah, Baylor is 4-0 this season. They had a 6-point win against Duke on a neutral floor to open up the season. Only won by 13 against Lindenwood and against UNLV by 8. Maybe that's the reason. Bart Torvik, who has the analytics site also for the women's side, has Baylor at number 27. Another bit of a surprise in that one. Just kind of looking through the roster and some of their top players. Probably their best player, Talia Scott, 5'9" guard. You have a senior also in there. It's, I guess, not a traditional, Baylor team when you think of some of the big front lines they've had. You mentioned Griner, but they've had a bunch of them that have come through. They do have one real tall player in Kirsten Johnson, but here's the other part too. The two-headed monster now that Iowa has been able to put out there, we're seeing the leap in year number 2. And I think we thought it was going to happen, but Ava Hayden looks really good. And Layla Hayes, I think she's further ahead than what we saw from Hayden a year ago at that center position. Having both of those players, I think, is going to go a long way.
Yeah, and Kirk Ferentz has said this on the football side before, and I think it rings true even more so on the basketball side. These early season rankings are pointless.
Yeah,
a lot of these teams are going to win and lose games, and it only matters where you are at the end of the season. So when you look at this, the metrics, and Baylor's more of a back end of the top 25 team, I tend to trust the numbers and the metrics than I do people who rank teams basically a lot of times on reputation and reputation alone. So I agree with you. The two bigs really help Iowa kind of open things up for other people offensively. It gives other teams, opposing teams, a lot to have to game plan for. And if they can both stay healthy and both contribute the way that they have so far this season, Jan Jensen's going to have another fun season on our hands.
We continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks to our everyday listeners with us each and every day. We're your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast. We're going to make some picks as we come back. Take a look at the Big Ten slate, the national slate, and a pick on Iowa against Michigan State as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. College football is here. It is winding down, though, this season. Senior day at Kinnick Stadium. Still couldn't be more excited. For the tailgates, the rivalries, energy in the stands, there's nothing like college football. But let's be real. Getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping for you when you get to checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You're looking for tickets at Kinnick Stadium. They got you covered there. Great seats all across Kinnick and some amazing deals. You want to get in there and celebrate those seniors for senior days. The app is super simple to use. I can see where I'm going to be inside Kinnick Stadium, inside Carver, or anywhere else before buying. Plus, no surprise fees. My favorite part of Game Time is just that. How many times has it happened to you? You get there, you think you got a great deal, and then those fees add up. Not the case with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Trent and Todd back with you one final time. It is time to make our picks presented by FanDuel as we take a look at the lines this week. Iowa 16.5-point favorite in their matchup against Michigan State. We'll get to that game here momentarily. Todd, this one jumps off the screen. And as somebody that is an underdog player that does not like playing favorites, I want to lay it so heavy with Illinois against Wisconsin this week. I know Bucky got the win. Congratulations to them a couple weeks ago against Washington. Maybe you can make the argument now that they know Fickle's coming back that they're going to be hanging around. I don't buy it. I think Illinois absolutely bludgeons this squad, lays it to them. I will happily lay the 8.5 that is out there currently. I got it earlier this week. It was one of my first bets of the week at 7.5. I think the Illini cruise. And plus it's Bert Bielema going up against his old team. If he's got a chance, he's going to rub it in.
I was just going to ask you, remind me again who the head coach of the Illinois Fighting Illini is. Brett's going to take that team and do whatever he can to inflict a little pain on that Wisconsin fan base. And I agree with you. I think that's a pretty solid play there, kind of a hangover spot for Wisconsin. I think it's more of a, they got that win than it is maybe a 2001, Kirk Ferentz type where you put some wins together and it's turning around for you. I don't see that when I look at this Luke Fickell-led Wisconsin team. So I think that's a very astute pick, and you got it at a good number there because it has moved a little bit.
Anything Big Ten-wise jump out to you? Anything that you like on the national scene? What's your favorite pick that you got on the board this week?
Nothing really jumps out, but I'm looking at Minnesota as a 4-point underdog against Northwestern. And if granted, it's a road game for the Gophers, but that just strikes me as a game that could be, coming down to a field goal or something, or Minnesota could win it outright. So among the Big Ten games, that's probably the one that I would circle. And certainly I think I feel pretty confident, and maybe you do as well, that you can probably trust Iowa as a heavy favorite at home this week. And I know that we just gave them the kiss of death by me saying that, but I do think that this is going to be one of those games where Iowa rolls and probably covers what for them is a really big number.
Yeah, I go back to the Minnesota game, the Wisconsin game. Iowa's been bullies against teams that they're decidedly better than. And certainly as the back half of the year has continued, that has been the case. Now, unfortunately, we do not get props that we can bet on here, individual player props in the state of Iowa. But for our out-of-state viewers and listeners, you can definitely do that. So I'd like to take a peek at these every single week and see what the numbers are. Mark Gronowski, 140.5 yards has kind of been the total that he has had throughout the course of the year. You're a bettor, Todd. Are you disappointed, sad, frustrated that we can't in the state of Iowa because of the law, the way it was written? We can do it for other games. You want to bet on player props in the USC Oregon game this week, you can, but you just can't do it here on the players, Iowa State, UNI, and Drake. You got a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that, given the fact that over the river in Illinois, you can't bet on any teams that are from the state of Illinois. So there's restrictions, and then there's worse restrictions. And plus, a lot of my friends are in the Quad Cities. They're only about a 20, 25-minute drive away from going across the river. And then, boom, magically, those props are there for you. So I would rather have it regulated and make people feel a little bit more comfortable about things than to have it sort of be the wild, wild west that it was portrayed to be the last couple of years with the gambling scandals and things like that. So I think it's a small price to pay to have the liberty and freedom to be able to bet on the Hawkeyes or the Cyclones. Because again, if you're in Illinois and you want to get down on that Fighting Illini game this weekend, no dice.
146.5. That is legally the over-under passing yards for Gronowski this week. I looked at Moulton. Is a 92.5, something maybe I would have my eye on, but I'm stuck here in the middle of the state. So difficult for me to get over to the river from over here just to make, my $10 wager that I'm going to put on there. Probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. Well, Todd, this has been fun as always. Big week coming up next week with Thanksgiving. Of course, quick turnaround with Black Friday, the matchup against Nebraska. We're going to find out a whole lot more about the men's basketball team against Ole Miss. What are you more excited for? The finale against Nebraska or the matchup against Ole Miss on the men's basketball side?
I have a hard time saying this, but the basketball, I as much as the Iowa-Nebraska rivalry has been kind of interesting, there's no Big Ten West title on the line this year. Again, some of the things that have been taken away from us. So I watched the men's basketball game with a lot of these yahoos over my shoulder last week, the Xavier game. And it was just fun to sit around and drink some beers with your buddies and enjoy watching Iowa basketball again. And I thought Xavier was going to give them a little bit of a challenge. We'll learn more about this team. You mentioned Little Richard earlier. He's going to have definite growing pains there in that first year. So give me the basketball. Give me them going up against a team that should give them a little bit of a challenge. And I still want to learn more about this team, but I am still firmly a believer that this team's a lot better than some people are making it out to be. So as it goes against everything in my DNA to turn my back on football, especially Black Friday and Thanksgiving, but give me basketball.
Well said. No doubt about it. He's Todd Brommelkamp. I'm Trent Condon. And thanks for being here with us on Locked On Hawkeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Todd, we will talk to you again hopefully next week. We'll see what the schedule looks like with Thanksgiving. A lot of moving parts that are always happening there. I'll be back with you Thursday evening. We'll have a rapid reaction podcast to both basketball games, Iowa Baylor on the women's side and the Iowa men against Chicago State. Plus, we'll get you set for Iowa Michigan State. We'll have a crossover episode of Locked On with Matt Sheehan from over at Locked On Spartans. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube, or 5-star reviews on the podcast side. We'll talk to you again tonight.